Diamond B Sports presents the American Sports Cavalcade with your host, the Tennessee Cowboy, Ed Bruce, and Brock Yates and Steve Evans. The American Sports Cavalcade.
Hi, I'm Ed Bruce. Today, the American Sports Cavalcade will be featuring National Hot Rod Association Championship drag racing from the Northstar Nationals in Brainerd, Minnesota. We'll see the funny cars, the top alcohol dragsters, and a whole lot more. As always, my good friends and racing experts, Brock Yates and Steve Evans, will be there to call the action for you. From time to time, I'll be back here in St. Petersburg, Florida, at the Sunshine Drag Strip, and I'll get a chance to talk to a former NHRA champion and drag strip legend. He'll tell us about some of the changes over the years in drag racing. But right now, let's go back to Brainerd, Minnesota, and Brock and Steve.
Welcome to the land of the sky blue waters in the great state of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. Hi, I'm Brock Yates, welcoming you to another American Sports Cavalcade and a day of NHRA Championship drag racing, the Northstar Nationals at Brainerd, Minnesota. As the racers at Brainerd search for more speed and lower ETs, let's pause for a minute to think about another search, a search that went on around here for about 300 years. It's centered on this tiny little stream in central Minnesota. Men like LaSalle, Marquette and Joliet, Zebulon Pike, the man who discovered Pike's Peak, all searched for this little stretch of water. It was finally discovered about 150 years ago by a man by the name of Henry Stockman. And if Stockman was to follow the current as it begins here, for about 2,500 miles, he and you and I would arrive at the Gulf of Mexico and the great city of New Orleans, because this little stream is at the headwaters of the greatest river in the world, the mighty Mississippi. Just a few miles downstream, the action is a little bit more hectic, a little noisier too. And to bring you up to date on what's going on at the Northstar Nationals, here's my pal and my associate, Steve Evans.
What's going on are funny cars. The Northstar Nationals is the youngest of the National Hot Rod Association's World Championship Series events and is located in Brainerd, Minnesota, in the heartland of vacation country. Well, Brock, while you're out soaking up the local color, you'll remember that you asked me to find you some accommodations close to the racetrack. I've done better than that. I have found you a room right here inside the racetrack. The blue little pointed tent, you have a confirmed reservation. And you won't be lacking for company either. There's over 20,000 drag racing fans camped in the infield of Brainerd International Raceway's road course, the front straightaway of which is now one of the world's finest drag strips, and you're only about 50 feet from the cars and stars of the Northstar Nationals. And knowing what a sport you are, Brock, I have signed you. There's your alarm clock. That'll function every morning about this time. Anyway, I signed you up for all of the recreational activities, including one of my personal favorites.
Oh, Evans, a ringer through the magic of television. But believe me, the action's going to be a lot hairier here than horseshoes, so stick around for more from Brainerd, Minnesota.
Already, the injectors are being primed as the first round of AA Fuel Funny Car competition is only moments away. But first, Brock, what is this magic of television stuff? I don't want to hear it. You know how many hours I practiced to make that ringer right on cue?
Sure, Evans, and I've seen you draw to an inside straight, too.
If you got it, you got it. The first of the 3,000 horsepower nitro-burning engines has come to life. The electric starter is removed from the upper pulley on the supercharger, and soon the body will latch down. Nothing makes more noise, nothing makes more smoke in all of auto racing than nitro funny cars.
Absolutely right, Steve. Unquestionably the most spectacular automobiles on four wheels. And here comes young Tom Anderson from upstate New York in an unsponsored automobile. Really one of the guys that gets the biggest bang for the buck in this league. He's done very well against Frank Hawley, run against him a couple of times, but Anderson has never yet won an NHRA World Championship event. It may be his day today. He's been running very well. He's confident, drives very well, but this man may be the best driver of them all in funny cars. Frank Hawley, the reigning world champion from London, Ontario. Steve Evans had a chance to talk with Frank Hawley earlier.
Well, Frank Hawley and Tom Anderson have been going at it hammer and tong all season long, but he's ready for you this time, it looks like.
Yeah, he's running really fast. We've struggled a little bit. We raced him in the final at Winter Nationals and the Mile High Nationals. We got him twice there, and I think things run in 3. So if he wants to beat us, I think he's going to have to run another 588.
Tom Anderson has completed his burnout in that yellow and white Mercury LN7 bodied funny car, and he will come to the line in a few moments for another exchange of niceties with Frank Hawley over there in the Chi-Town Hustler. A man, Steve, that I think is probably as good squeezing the lights as anybody in the funny car leagues.
Well, since they started winning a lot of races and quite a bit of money, Frank Hawley actually doesn't push the light as hard as he once did. You got to be hungry, like a Tom Anderson is, to really go for those quick reaction times.
Well, he'll need everything he's got because he's carrying number 8 on that car, but the other car, the Chi-Town Hustler, carries that gold number 1, Steve. And that means he carries an awesome reputation into this race.
And also is leading again the points towards yet a second world championship. So it's Hawley in the far lane. In the near lane is Tom Anderson as they move into stage very, very carefully. And they leave right together, but suddenly Anderson loses traction. Has to get off the throttle momentarily, and that's all the brake Frank Hawley needs to pull it out at 5.92 seconds, 241 miles an hour. Frank Hawley goes into round number 2. You notice that there was no parachute on the Tom Anderson car. Not to worry. This is probably the longest drag strip in the world because they can literally coast all the way around the road course. The parachute, not all that necessary at Brainerd.
All right, Steve, and the next pair of funnies come to the line. This is the Corvette-bodied car of Ken Veeney, one of the very few Corvettes running in the funnies.
But I think we'll see a proliferation of them very soon, Brock. They're so good-looking and popular with the fans.
Sure are. Everybody loves a Corvette. And certainly Ken Veeney's automobile, beautifully trimmed out as he does his burnout. And his competition, Kenny Bernstein in the Mercury LN7, a very heavily sponsored automobile, a very active drag racer, but a guy who's been in a pretty serious slump recently, Steve.
He has, Brock, and I think that's because of his all-or-nothing approach. Kenny and his crew chief, Dale Armstrong, they'll either win or not qualify. There's not much in the middle.
Well, I'm sure Veeney's thinking upset here against Bernstein, hoping that he can prolong that slump. But on the other hand, Bernstein, a man, very, very serious competitor, a guy who just never quits. A 24-hour drag racer. So as they get ready, let's go to Steve Evans and Frank Hawley.
Well, Frank Hawley said things run in 3s, and that's the 3rd time. This time you got him on his starting line. You whole shot at him. 400s.
400s, boy, I'll tell you that's something, but awful pumped up. These guys work awful hard to get the car running good. All I have to do is leave on time, and it's nice when I can do it once in a while.
Did you ever even see him down the racetrack, Frank?
No, never. Never at all. It's great. We're going to be back next round.
Let's go to Brock with Tom Anderson.
Tom, almost too much power, huh? Yeah, that's what it was. It was too much power. Plus, the racetrack's getting a little tighter, and we made a little bit too much power, and it went into a small shake, and when it shakes a little bit, and then it pulls the tires into smoke, and we just overpowered the racetrack.
Stayed in it all the way, though. Tried to catch him, huh?
Well, I lifted once and then got back in and tried to catch him.
Well, a super show anyway. 588 the first round. You go home thinking about that anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll do better next time.
Absolutely. Good job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, the motors are coming up to temperature. Kenny Bernstein backing up from the long, smoky burnout. We're just about ready for the second of 4 races here in round number 1. Kenny Bernstein from Dallas, Texas, a former restaurateur, now, as Brock said, a 24-hour-a-day drag racer. Drag racing has never had a better ambassador. Ken Veeney, an inventor, a manufacturer of speed equipment from Wadsworth, Ohio, comes out of the alcohol funny car ranks and stepping up to race with the big boys. And it's far more expensive in this category, Brock. Kenny Bernstein estimates as much as $500 a run.
And it could be that all that money's starting to pay off for Bernstein, because earlier Steve had an opportunity to talk to Kenny about how he's been running here.
A very consistent weekend for you, Kenny. Something you haven't enjoyed this season. Now Ken Veeney stands in your way.
Well, he's a good one. He runs good. He ran 91 yesterday, so consequently he can step up. He was a little slower last round than we were, but we weren't on course last round either, so he'll be a good race.
You feel confident you can come up with another one of those low 90s, high 80s?
Well, I think now we had a little problem then with number 1 cylinder dropping. Armstrong really leaned on it. If it'll run, he'll run 80 again, but that's the point. If it'll run, that's the question.
So Kenny Bernstein comes to the line under the watchful eyes of veteran official starter Buster Couch. You see him there on the right side of your screen. A man that's seen probably more drag race starts than any 10 men on earth, Steve.
And you notice Buster looking very carefully at both these cars to make sure that there's no fluids leaking out of them that could lead to an accident. Ken Vinny in the near lane, out of the alcohol funny car ranks, has only been in the nitro category less than 1 year. Kenny Bernstein in the far lane. Vinny is away first, but he red lights. Ken Vinny leaves too soon. Kenny Bernstein blasts on through with an elapsed time of 5:97. He maintains that consistency at 243 miles an hour.
So as Kenny rolls to a stop, he will go into the second round and once again go under the watchful eyes of starter Buster Couch. Earlier, Steve had a chance to talk with this interesting man.
After 21 years as NHRA's official starter, it's about time that somebody kidnapped Buster Couch and brought him down to the end of the track where it's a little quieter. Buster, your job entails a lot more than just pushing a button.
Well, it does, Steve, but it's just something you learn over the years. You know, it just looks easy because I have a good crew, you know, and the racers understand we have our signals together, what we're doing, and it just looks like I stand there and push the button.
Safety is your biggest concern up there.
Yes, it is. It's making sure the car's all properly. I give them a visual inspection to make sure the guys' the belts are fastened, their helmets are fastened, and, you know, the fire bottles have got the pins out of them, their extinguishers and things. You have to give them a quick check because, you know, the drivers get excited and they forget these little things.
Buster, you've been known to tease these guys pretty good, and occasionally they try to get back at you. What are some of the funny things that have happened on the starting line? I remember an incident with Frank Bradley. I believe it was in California.
Yeah, no, we was in Gainesville, and I know I'm afraid of snakes and bugs. I don't know why, but I am. And so he had a rubber snake, and he was throwing it at me when he came by on a burnout, and I like to run over about 2 or 3 people getting out of the way. But I fixed him up, though. I took a big... It was about a 5-gallon bucket of ice cold water. It was real mushy with ice in it. And when he came up to make another qualifying run, I just dumped it in his lap.
Well, it's the people that make this sport so spectacular, and Buster Couch is one of them. Stick around. We'll be back with more funny car action from Brainerd after this.
We're back at Brainerd International Raceway for more fuel funny car competition in the NHRA Northstar Nationals. The body about to be latched down on Roland Leon's Hawaiian car, driven by Mike Dunn. What a tenacious young man, Brock, to come back after an incredible crash a few months ago in Columbus, Ohio at the Spring Nationals. Lesser men would have quit.
Boy, I'll guess, Steve, that was one of the most unbelievable crashes in racing history when the old version of the Hawaiian came into that crash net at maybe 150 miles an hour, a ball of fire. Didn't look like Mike could even have a chance of surviving, and yet he walked away.
What a pretty new car Roland has prepared here. This is a replica of sorts of a Dodge Charger.
And he will be going against young Tim Gross as he does his burnout. Tim, a lot like Tom Anderson, unsponsored, a young, struggling race driver, trying his best, going against a heavily sponsored team of the Hawaiian. So as this sort of David and Goliath pair get ready to go, let's go to the other end of the track with Steve Evans and Kenny Bernstein.
Kenny Bernstein gets around a red lighting Ken Vinny, but the elapsed time of 5:97 doesn't please you particularly.
No, we're still off that 1/10. We need 88, 87, I think, to really win. They're all in the 9s. I guess it's hotter right now, and conditions aren't quite as good as they were yesterday, and we're still just sneaking up on it. Him red lighting bothered me a little bit. I thought I was late, and I watched him over there and got out of the groove, which didn't help. I really psyched me.
So you actually didn't know he had red lighted?
Yeah, I did. When he left, I thought I was late, and then I looked and saw the tree, and that's when I really didn't go straight. I think I really caused the ET to hurt a little because I got out of the groove. I was watching him. I thought, boy, I'm late. I'm in trouble.
Good luck next time.
It's a testimony to the technical progress of this sport that a guy like Kenny Bernstein can be disappointed with a time of 5:97. There was a day when nobody thought a 6-second drag race was even possible, Steve.
Well, I tell you, Brock, who won't be disappointed with a 5:97, and that's the Spirit car, the 84 Corvette bodied machine of Tim Gross. His wife, Barbara, backing him up, and that's a very important part of the crew's work on the starting line, to make sure that that car is sitting exactly in those hot, sticky burnout tracks. If you get out of the tracks, the burnout was a waste of money.
All right, Steve, as the Hawaiian does its second burnout, Mike Dunn, the driver, is an interesting young man. He's a second-generation drag racer. His father, Jim Dunn, a long-time competitor in this sport and a very good one.
Tim Gross is one of those guys, Brock, that literally lives hand to mouth as he tries to carve out a living in the sport of professional drag racing. He's been through his crashes, but maybe nothing like what we saw Mike Dunn endure at Columbus, Ohio, the Spring Nationals. Here is Dunn. The throttle sticks. The engine over-revs and explodes suddenly into a ball of fire. Right now, Mike Dunn has absolutely no idea where he is on the racetrack. Suddenly, you'll notice the right rear slick literally explodes, ripping apart the body. Now, this is one of the shortest drag strips on the circuit. Mike Dunn has no parachute. It burned off in the fire. He just instinctively is trying to keep that car somewhere on the pavement. The idea with the net is to try to hit it head on. And fortunately for Mike Dunn, he accomplishes that as the body just melts. The fiberglass, red hot, almost transparent. No right tire, no brakes, and into the aircraft-style catch nets. And incredibly enough, they do their job. The body is stripped off by the first net. The second net collects the 150-mile-an-hour out-of-control automobile.
The most unbelievable part about this whole sequence is right now, because you see Mike Dunn extracting himself from that destroyed race car and moving out of the fire and flame absolutely unhurt. Mike Dunn back now at the Northstars in perfect shape. Steve talked with him earlier.
Well, Mike, you've got the surprise of this event in round number 2, Tim Gross.
Yeah, he's definitely a surprise. He ran real good qualifying, and he came back first round, repeated, and ran a little quicker than us, so he's got lane choice. He's going to be tough.
Well, this has been a new car for you folks after the accident in Columbus. You've sorted it out. It's just really starting to come around.
Yeah, it's been running a little bit better every week. We've been just changing it, and it's been running real good. We got rid of our Japanese import after the crash. We got an American-built car now. It's working real well.
Brock, Mike Dunn teasing a certain chassis builder in Southern California that built that car. They crashed at Columbus. Apparently, Mike wasn't too fond of that machine. Look at Tim Gross's beautiful 84 Corvette. How does a guy with no budget at all have that kind of together act? Amazing.
It sure is a pretty car. Unfortunately, though, drag racing is not a beauty contest, and Tim is up against the raw power of the Hawaiian.
Tim Gross just overpowers the racetrack, and for a moment there was in a little bit of trouble, but he wisely gets off the throttle, regains control, and looks at the back of Mike Dunn's parachute as he runs 5.99 seconds to go into round number 2. Tim Gross out of this race early.
A tough break for Tim, Steve, but yet another example that funny car racing is not just simply a question of stomping on the throttle. It takes an awful lot of finesse to maintain control over 2,500 horsepower. The next pair, Al Segrini in that beautiful green new Firebird. This car started life once as a Firebird, although any relationship to when you buy in a showroom is pretty tenuous. That's a fiberglass shell over a tubular chassis carrying that monster supercharged engine. His competition will be Mark Oswald in the beautiful Candies and Hughes Firebird. But before they race, let's go to Steve.
So Mike Dunn with the helmet off, and Mike, they tell me that up in the starting line you had a tremendous lead, a nice hole shot advantage going in.
Yeah, well, I actually thought I was a little late. The car's just leaving tremendously. It went out there and shook a little bit and got a little loose, and I pedaled it once. And did you hear what it ran?
590 something. Are track conditions going to be important from here on? Is it going to start changing on us?
I think they're going to start going away a little bit, so it's going to be kind of tricky here out. We don't know whether we should detune it or leave it alone or what.
You get into the clutch and the tires and all the things that make them run.
Yeah, there's definitely all that we got to contend with, but we'll figure something out.
Very articulate young man, Mike Dunn, but he may need a little bit more than a 599 to win the Northstar Nationals, Steve.
You know, Brock, drag racing, especially in the funny car category, is a tremendous guessing game, and Mike alluded to that. Al Segrini, one of the better guessers, as he's won 4 NHRA national events. Segrini from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, a talented driver. This man, Mark Oswald, tabbed by car owner Candies and Hughes to wheel the first funny car that Candies has run in a lot of years. They ran a top fuel dragster also with Oswald at the wheel and set the national record. Interestingly enough, they took that same engine, put it in the funny car, and have run the fastest speed ever. That is Paul Candies, the owner, wisely getting out of the way. 256 miles an hour, the best clocking ever by a funny car, belongs to the Candies and Hughes camp.
And there you see the Segrini car backing up. Once again, these automobiles, as you said earlier, Steve, have taken an awful lot of care and sensitivity in lining up. You might think that they just sort of back them up and drive down the drag strip, but it's a lot more complex than that, isn't it?
Oh, you bet it is. And right now, Mark Oswald, I'm sure, is looking down at the engine temperature gauges to make sure that it's in that proper operating range. Paul Candies helping Mark in because the body is so low and the injector so high that until they get right up to the starting line, they have a hard time seeing those bottom lights on the Christmas tree. Paul Candies in the tugboat and barge business in Houma, Louisiana.
I'll tell you, it's a miracle that these guys can see anything out of these automobiles with that giant blower and injector casing sticking up in front of them. And they sit way in the back of that bodywork, just about in the back seat if this was a real car.
And they take a tremendous physical beating as well. This is a good race, but Mark Oswald, about 300 feet out, just moves away from Al Segrini. Mark Oswald at 595, 248 miles an hour. He joins the rest in round 2.
Although I'm sure Mark may be looking to clean up his run the next time. He fishtailed a little bit about half track, but no matter. He does make the semifinals. The other pairing, Mike Dunn versus world champion Frank Hawley. And, of course, Mark Oswald will face Kenny Bernstein after disposing of Al Segrini. And now Steve Evans is with Mark at the other end of the track.
Mark Oswald, you were worried about having crossed the center line?
Yeah, it was about as close as you'd want to come.
Big top end speed, 248.
Yeah, good. I think we stepped it up a little. We got a little lucky there. We had changed some parts between rounds we didn't really want to. And we made a good guess on them, so it paid off.
Been a long time since I've seen a closer semifinal. All of the cars have run mid-590s, all 4 of them in the semis.
And it looks like that's what it takes anymore.
So lane choice is a battle.
It sure is. It's getting tough. The track's getting warmer all the time. It's going to be tough.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you, Steve.
So we're going to see some hard racing from the funny cars, but before that, we'll be back with some top alcohol dragster action from the Northstar Nationals. Stay with us.
We're back at the Northstar Nationals. You look at the crowd here and you realize that drag racing has become one of the world's leading spectator motorsports, but it wasn't always that way. In fact, originally it was just a casual get-together of automotive enthusiasts, and Ed Bruce is right now down in Florida with a man who was there in the very beginning.
It's my pleasure to be sitting here at Sunshine Drag Strip in St. Petersburg, Florida, with one of the true, real legends of motorsports, and particularly drag racing, Art Malone. Art, we see these big fan facilities these days, like Brainerd. You walk through the pit area, you see all the 18-wheel rigs, the vans, the trucks, television, tape decks. What was it like when you started?
Well, there wasn't no 18-wheelers. We finally branched out and got us a Suburban truck, but we started out with just a car, you know. In the trunk, we had a rocker arm, maybe one piston, maybe one bearing, maybe one spark plug, and that was it. You know, it was kind of rough. We eat out of garbage cans and stayed in cheap motels. And
how many days a week are we talking about on the road?
Well, it wasn't uncommon to leave Tampa and be gone for 3 or 4 months because we couldn't come back and forth, even though gasoline was 19 cents a gallon then, and motels were $8 a night for the good ones. We still stayed on the road because we tried to plan our tours in the California area, you know, and catch tracks going out and tracks coming back, and 3 or 4 months wasn't uncommon.
Sounds kind of like being on the road with a hillbilly band, I'm going to tell you. We're going to go back to Brainerd now, where it's a little bit easier getting there, but it's a little bit faster these days, too.
Well, thanks, Ed. We're back with some very fast automobiles. Maybe not the fastest. They look like the AA fuel dragsters. They're basically the same automobiles, except for one thing. The engine, Steve, quite a bit different in terms of the fuel they burn.
And Brock, that's why the category is called Top Alcohol Dragster. They're only allowed to run alcohol fuel. The correct name would be menthanol. And to make sure that they do, that there's no cheating going on, NHRA has a fuel check team down on the return road, and after every qualifying and every elimination win, they check to make sure that guys like Don Woosley of Winchester, Kentucky, have nothing but alcohol in that tank. His opponent here in Top Alcohol Racing will be Ken Murray, one of the many Canadians involved in this category. He's from Winnipeg. Nitromethane, very expensive in this country and even more so in Canada. So a lot of the Canadians stick to the alcohol classes.
Well, they're very good classes for running on a budget, Steve. You got almost the same punch and power as you do out of the nitromethane burning engines, but they're much more reliable. You can run lots longer with less money on an alcohol car than you can with a fuel burner.
Very true, Brock, but the initial investment in the engine and the chassis is about the same. In fact, maybe even a little more expensive for these guys because they use 2 transmissions. They're a 3-speed automobile. They use very expensive crankshafts to get a lot of cubic inches. They don't have the luxury of just pouring more nitro in the motor. They've got to do it with cylinder pressure. In fact, they're starting to find more breakage in this class than they once did because, leave it to the drag racers, they'll find the weak link. Just get them long enough.
Well, it's competition at its best, and it just drives everything to the outer limits. as we see these two automobiles stage. Woolsey, by the way, is one of the top runners in TAD, Steve.
Yes, he is. Came out of the competition eliminator ranks, has held many, many records and won a lot of divisional and national titles. And it's Woolsey away first. The Canadian red lights in the far lane, and Don Woolsey will pass him anyway and take the win. Murray in the far lane left the starting line too soon. He knew that Woolsey was going to be tough, and he had to gamble a bit, try to get a hole shot, but instead he left too soon, and the Christmas tree bypassed the green and went right to red. He's out.
And there's no recourse with the old red light, is there? Once it says goodbye, it is goodbye.
Well, there's not a lot of second chances in this sport. If you cross the center line or the outside line, if you red light, if you hold up the other driver too long in the starting line, these guys can invent ways to lose.
Boy, how about that? You're absolutely right, and most of it involves mental pressure. This is a mind game down here in the starting line. It's complicated enough as it is, but when you got some problems like Vic Anderson has, it really gets serious.
Hard to tell what the problem is. In fact, I think Vic is trying to relate the problem to the crew. Has he lost fire? I believe he has. In fact, the truck is being pulled alongside. They're going to get the electric starter out of the back. Rarely do you get an opportunity to restart one of these cars, and rarely is it successful. I guarantee you right now that Starter Buster Couch has looked at his watch, has marked the time to make sure that all of Anderson's problems here don't handicap Bob Buccini, that his engine does not overheat on the starting line. That's not as big a problem with the alcohol-fueled cars because they run so cool. He's got it, Brock. It's come back to life, but is he going to have time to do all the necessary burnouts, and will the engine be warm enough?
Steve, is there a special amount of time that they get, or is that a judgment call on the part of Buster?
It is a judgment call, Brock, and on the part of Buster Couch, there is no appeal. All decisions are final. So Vic Anderson, a former top fuel racer now in the alcohol ranks, got a lucky break there. He did not consume too much time, got his engine relit. Remains to see how he does, though, against Bob Buccini, another Canadian from Winnipeg.
As a matter of fact, a neighbor of Ken Murray's who went down in the first round against Don Woolsey. So Anderson here in the near lane. A lucky break to be even present for the start.
They stage, they're ready, the tree flashes, there's a red light in the far lane. The Canadian Bob Buccini has given this race to Vic Anderson. After all of Anderson's problems, he goes into round number 2 with a very good 6.64 elapsed time at 206 miles an hour. He will right now try to take a big, deep breath.
Boy, talk about Christmas morning. In the far lane, Buccini, you see him red light instantaneously. Anderson, of course, having trouble getting started and then winning the race on a red light. A very lucky boy. Steve Evans is with him at the far end of the racetrack.
Ready? Boy, just when all looked darkest, huh?
Oh, that was a bleak period, I tell you. A scary moment.
What happened back in the burnout area?
Well, evidently there wasn't enough RPM and we were past the water, and it just pulled the motor down enough to shut her off, and we're lucky we got to restart it again.
Did you see his red light up there?
No. No, I didn't see that. I didn't
well, you
see
won
that.
it. You won it.
Oh, great. After winning the points meet here a month ago, we had to come back and look good, and this was great, tell you.
Maybe it's an omen for the rest of the day.
Oh, let's hope so. Thank you kindly.
You can bet there'll be more RPM second round, though.
You betcha.
So Vic Anderson from just down the interstate in Minneapolis. Got to be a lot of hometown rooters for him in this giant crowd here at Brainerd. Stick around for more from the Northstar Nationals.
More top alcohol dragster action coming your way from Brainerd, Minnesota and the NHRA Northstar Nationals. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and our friend Ed Bruce, who's down in Florida. We'll be talking to him from time to time. And Brock, this is Darrell Gwynn, one of the brightest young stars in drag racing from Miami, Florida.
He sure is, Steve. In fact, on the cowling of the car, if you look really closely, you can see it says the kid. And he is the kid in this league. A very, very fine young driver and a racing family.
This boy probably went to his first drag race before he could walk or talk, as his father was a championship competitor and competition eliminator, and he's up against a former world champion, the pretty yellow car from Aurora, Colorado, of Brian Raymer. So Raymer has to adjust from an altitude of 5,000 feet at his home track in the Denver area down to virtually sea level here in Minnesota, but he's done it many times. The kid, Darrell Gwynn, only 21 years of age, and in his very first national competition, in fact, the U.S. Nationals went to the final round, and a lot of the pro car owners, Candies and Hughes being one of them, have said if this kid's ever looking for a ride, have him see us first. You see a lot of different engines, Brock, in the top alcohol ranks, so that's one of the interesting qualities of this category. Brian Raymer has the Donovan engine at about 427 cubic inches. That was the first aluminum motor made specifically for drag racing. Darrell Gwynn, on the other hand, has the second motor that was invented for the application, the Keith Black power plant.
Two very familiar names in drag racing, Keith Black and Donovan. In all the stock classes, of course, you have to stay with the production blocks, but in the funny cars and the dragsters, you can use these specially fabricated blocks, most of which are built on the West Coast, Steve.
Yes, they are, and it's nervous time now as the RPMs come up. They are pre-staged. The top yellow lights are on. First to stage is Gwynn. It is a dead even start. No advantage at the starting line. Raymer's front wheels finally settle down. Raymer, no! Darrell Gwynn, in the last few feet of the racetrack, comes around at 6.63 seconds to a losing 6.68, 205 miles an hour for the kid who goes into round two. Darrell Gwynn backing down on the motor to aid him and stopping the car. I would imagine, Brock, that neither of these drivers knows who won. I mean, we could barely tell visually. Fortunately, the National Hot Rod Association a guy with Raymer's talent out in front of you like that.
Well, I'm worried about the red light situation with the car. We're just trying to not red light for the weekend. We fixed the chassis last weekend. We put a little bit more power in it for first round. I'm just trying not to red light.
What do you mean the red light situation with the car?
Well, we've had a problem with the front end lifting up and red lighting. It hasn't been me. And we think we got the problem solved. We've been at Garlitz's last week, and he fixed the car up for us, and we're really proud.
So that electronic beam doesn't know whether the wheels went forwards or straight up?
Correct.
Okay, go get him.
Thank you.
So a happy young man, Darrell Gwynn, one of the rising stars in all kinds of drag racing. Who's to know where his future will take him in this sport? Okay, more top alcohol dragster action. Dennis Forsell from Minneapolis, Minnesota, one of the really big names in this sport. He's going up against yet another man from Winnipeg, Canada, David Fedorowicz.
And Brock, Fedorowicz is a new name to national event competition. What is this, the third car we've seen from Winnipeg? That has got to be the hotbed of Canadian alcohol dragster racing.
It sure is. And of course, we saw another pair, Vic Anderson from Minneapolis, square off against Bob Bassini from Winnipeg. Anderson won that one. Let's see if the Canadians can come back. So far, they're 0 for 2.
So there's a lot of Canadian fans in the stands who'll be rooting for this guy, David Fedorowicz. He's the last of the Maple Leaf contingent alive in top alcohol dragster competition.
He's facing a tough man in Dennis Forsell, one of the big names in this kind of racing, along with Darrell Gwynn and Don Wolseley, both of whom have won.
Interesting set of exhaust headers on Forsell's car, Brock. They look like they came off of a funny car. When again we see Fedorowicz's car, you'll notice his are the zoomy style that point straight up to actually put force down on the tires for more traction. But Forsell feels maybe those slow you down a bit. The wing is up there for that same function, so he's using a totally different type of exhaust system. Here you can see the contrast.
And that's the neat thing about drag racing. Classic hot rodding. And speaking of hot rodding, that's Steve Gibbs, the competition director of the National Hot Rod Association, going out there to get rid of a little garbage before the next race, Steve.
Oh, I'll tell you, he's one of the best executives in motor racing. First to pre-stage is a Canadian on the far side. You see the top yellow light is on in his lane. That's just to help them get lined up. In comes Dennis Forsell in the near lane. The spindly front tires breaking those electronic beams. When they get staged, the RPMs will come up to probably 8,000, maybe more, and they are off. And with a good advantage at the start is a Canadian, but he's now falling behind. He could not parlay that whole shot into a win. It is Dennis Forsell from behind with a 6.63. You look at that elapsed time and the others we've seen in this round, it gives you some idea how competitive the semifinal round is going to be. These could be races of milliseconds. The turnaround crew directing Dennis Forsell off of the racetrack. When we do see that semifinal round, it'll be the kid, Darrell Gwynn from Miami versus Kentucky's Don Wolseley, and it'll be Dennis Forsell from Minnesota up against Vic Anderson. Brock Yates is at the end of the track with Dennis Forsell.
Dennis, we got you as a winner, but you don't seem very happy. What, you got some problems with the car?
Well, just felt a little lazy up on the big end. You didn't hear what the mile an hour was, did you?
No, I didn't. I think we got you at a 63, if I'm not sure.
Well, the field's close, nicely bunched. We're all right in there at 60s.
But you think you could use some more top end, huh?
Yeah, I think the car's laying down about mid-track.
So you got to get some more top end before next round. All right. Well, good first. Pass the first round anyway. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, NHRA may need that computer to call the winners in that semifinal round. They're that tightly bunched. Let's again go to Ed Bruce in Florida.
Back at Sunshine Drag Strip in St. Petersburg, Florida, with Art Malone. Art, when you got started, what made you and your crew unique in the business?
Well, we were the first touring professionals. There were guys that would go to events across the country for one event, but we stayed on the road for months. And at the time, we didn't even know we were touring professionals. We just finally figured it out after we'd been on the road about 6 months and making a heck of a living. We decided that we were touring professionals in the very first.
Now, you've been involved in motorsports for how many years?
Since 1954 is when
Okay, but you didn't really start in drag strips, right? And it was kind of an accident that got you into drags.
Really, it was. I was a oval track stock car racer and got involved with Don Garlis driving his car. And, of course, we started touring around and making money and getting our pictures taken and signing autographs, and I was an overnight hero. And, of course, everybody likes that, you know, the money and the hero part. Well, I couldn't give it up.
Did you foresee in those days 250 miles an hour, 5 and 6 second ETs?
No. In fact, the matter, I mean, 200 miles an hour would have been just awesome. We thought we was up against a wall. We didn't realize that they would have tires 3 times as wide and all these exotic fuel injections and great big mammoth blowers and all this crazy stuff, you know, and transmissions. We was all direct drive, and you didn't have the good strip conditions, the blowers and the traction compounds and the concrete launch pads and all that, you know. I mean, we just run on a piece of pavement that was dirty, and we didn't have the good clutches and the good pieces. It was just a man in there letting the clutch out halfway and hanging on the brake and doing what you could to get it down through there.
Let's go back to Brainerd and see some 250s and some 5 and 6 seconds, okay?
Ed, we'll be back to see the modern-day touring professionals in drag racing in just a moment.
Back at Brainerd, Minnesota, I'm Brock Yates along with Steve Evans, Ed Bruce down in Florida, bringing you more action from the Northstar Nationals. And Steve, it's pro stock time.
And a category the fans just love, Brock. These may look like street cars, they're required to, but under that skin is the most sophisticated race car in all of drag racing. And here's the man that owns the class, the 2-time world champion from Arlington, Texas, Lee Shepard. He drives the rear and Morrison Camaro. And he's up against an up-and-coming young professional from Cayuga, Indiana, Don Kuntz. He drives a beautiful Pontiac Firebird.
And Steve, all these cars run under very rigid rules. Minimum weight, 2,300 pounds, 500 cubic inch, normally aspirated engine running on gasoline.
Brock, these cars are so sophisticated in the suspension area, the chassis science, that they are the most expensive car to build in drag racing. Now let's watch Lee Shepard, the world champion, here in the near lane. In the far lane, the challenger from Indiana, Don Kuntz, Chevrolet versus Firebird. They stage very carefully. The RPMs come up, and they are off with a bit of a hole shot. That's a surprise. Lee Shepard may have been a bit complacent at the starting line, but now he's nervous by less than a car length. The horsepower of Shepard wins it at 786 to a defeated 801. But what a start for Kuntz. The electronic reaction timer tells us that Don Kuntz was only 0.02 of a second away from a perfect light. That's Kuntz in the far lane. Lee Shepard was 0.11 of a second away from the light. He was late. So Shepard was operating with a 0.07 handicap at this point on the racetrack. And only that famous rear and Morrison horsepower pulled it out for him. Brock is down at the far end with Lee Shepard, who had to be nervous at this point.
Put a hole shot on you, huh? Did he surprise you?
Yeah, Don always gets a real good light. I was a little bit late that time, but I guess we had a little more power than he did.
Got you at 886. You happy about that?
Well, I think that's a little slow. I hope we can go a little faster than that. We'll probably have to win this race.
Okay. So how's the racetrack holding up?
Well, it's about the same as it was first round. It might be a little bit slicker in places. But hopefully we can tune the suspension some for it.
Okay, well, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks, Lee. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The next race in this second round of Pro Stock will pit this man, 5-time world champion Bob Glidden in the '83 Ford Thunderbird, against the Chevrolet Camaro from Fairfield, Illinois. It is driven by David Hutchins, who was one of the winningest drivers ever in the sportsman class, but has found Pro Stock to be a good deal tougher. Bob and Etta Glidden, what a team they are from Whiteland, Indiana. Full-time professionals who many feel work harder at their craft than anybody in drag racing.
Well, Steve, like Kenny Bernstein, Bob Glidden's had kind of a dry spell recently.
Yes, he has, but Ford has finally perfected their new aluminum motor, and look at it fly. After a perfect start, it is Bob Glidden at the far end with the win, 7.90 seconds, 176 miles an hour. They waste no time getting the next pair fired and ready. Number 3 in the world, Warren Johnson in his Oldsmobile, doing the burnout pro stock style, not going over the starting line. The Oldsmobile does not have the aerodynamics of the Thunderbird or the Camaro, and it takes more horsepower to physically push it down the racetrack. Here you see the sleeker Camaro, driven by Joe Lapone of Malvern, Pennsylvania, the car owned by the famed Bill Jenkins, Mr. Chevrolet. Warren Johnson, who used to live right in this very area, has now moved down to Georgia, where more technology is available to him, and Warren is quite an innovator and has set the national speed record with this car. Joe Lapone in the far lane, a very alert, aggressive driver. Warren Johnson thinks more about the engine sometimes than his driving and can be late. It's a beautiful start by both of them. Warren Johnson and Joe Lapone. Joe Lapone was off the mark first, but Warren Johnson is there at 787 as Joe Lapone encounters some problems. But down at the far end with no problems at all is Bob Glidden, who's with Brock Yates.
Bob, quick interview, second round. How was it?
I think we made a little better run than we did the first round, but we're going to have to step it up a little bit. Well, I think we run Shepard next, so.
They're getting fast out there. Shepard ran an 86 last time, so he figures he's got to step it up too.
I think he ran a little quicker than we did.
Well, congratulations anyway. We'll see you in the next round.
Thank you much.
Thanks, Mark.
Pro stock marches on, and in the near lane is Frank Iaconio. From New Jersey, Frank has come so close to winning the world title on 2 separate occasions, but both times had to settle for the runner-up spot. Frank Iaconio, a terrific engine builder and a mighty good driver. His competition will be from Wayne, New Jersey, Don Campanella, who would be more than pleased with a couple of runner-up world championship finishes. He is in the far lane.
So we've got a couple of neighbors here from northern New Jersey going up against each other. And, of course, Frank Iaconio is the better known of the two, Steve.
But it's Campanella who's away first. Campanella 0.05 of a second closer to a light. And here comes Iaconio, though. Frank Iaconio by a little more than a fender. Due to that hole shot on Campanella's part, it made the race a good deal closer than it might have been. 787, 176 miles an hour. Watch Campanella in the far lane. You can see that car reacted first. Typical pro stock start with the wheels in the air. As soon as the car leaves, as soon as the driver can react, they grab and shift first gear. They'll shift 2 more times down the racetrack. In high gear, Iaconio has got to be wondering, where did Campanella come from? He's not supposed to be that close to me. Iaconio just squeaks it out.
Frank, everybody seems to be running in the high 80s in this second round. Is that what you think it's going to take to win? Or a couple of guys say maybe you got to go a little quicker.
Well, you know, maybe so, but the track seems to be getting worse, so I don't think you'll see any quicker times, you know. It seemed quite a bit worse the second round than it did the first round, and it was slow the first round. So.
You make any chassis changes for the third round to compensate for that slowness?
No, we kind of did that after first round, you know, so there's really not too much left to do.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit, maybe loosen up the front end a little bit, but that's about it.
Are you basically happy with the second round?
No, because I think Warren ran quicker than I did. So I think he got lane choice. So if he did, I'm not too happy.
Okay. Well, at least you got in the third round, so congratulations on that.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Frank, so intent, already thinking about that third round, and best that he should, because it's going to be tough. Lee Shepard will be up against the Ford of Bob Glidden. Frank Iaconio himself will be paired off with Warren Johnson in the Oldsmobile. If you like tire smoke and funny cars, stick with us.
We don't have to tell you this is one of the greatest vacation areas in North America. Just look at that giant crowd spread around the racetrack here at Brainerd, Minnesota for more Northstar Nationals action. As Frank Hawley's funny car, its lid still up, gets pulled out for the semifinals, Steve.
What a season this has been for Frank Hawley and the Chi-Town Hustler. They began as they ended last year, winning races. And Brock had a chance earlier when all was a little bit calmer to talk to Frank.
Frank, lane choice, made one yet?
Yeah, I think we're going to stay in the left. We started out today preferring the right, but we never run there. We've made 2 runs in the left. The car is working fine, and I don't think there's that much of a difference in the lane, so I'm looking for a real close drag race in the semifinal.
Not tampering with fate lane-wise, huh?
Oh, no. I learned a long time ago that to don't mess with stuff, and that's why this car's won a lot of drag races.
Well, the talking is over. Frank Hawley adjusting his gloves, getting comfortable in the Chi-Town Hustler. That engine is coming to life right now as Austin Coyle primes it with a little gasoline. To keep it running, the electric starter comes off, and now it's all up to Frank. Nothing more the crew can do. It's in the young Canadian's hands. They won 4 races this season so far, starting off with the Winter Nationals, the Gator Nationals in Florida, the Mile High Nationals. It goes on and on for a car that was totally unsponsored and still is for that matter. But here's the competition. A very hungry Mike Dunn and Roland Leong's car. They've had a disastrous season, as we showed you earlier, destroying that car in a fiery net collision. But Mike now got a taste of victory. He defeated Paul Smith in round number 1. You'll recall he got to Tim Gross in round 2 to earn the semifinal round berth. But here is where the Chi-Town's consistency usually starts to work for them. When everybody else starts making changes, guessing on the clutch or the fuel, Austin and Frank Hawley just do the same thing they always do. If there's a car on the grounds that can run 570, they don't worry about that. They'll go out and run their 595 and try to outlast everybody. But the Hawaiian, on the other hand, has a history of about this point in the race smoking the tires, and that can be due to track conditions. Brock talked to Mike about that.
Mike, looks like the weather's changing rather radically, getting a lot more humid, maybe a little hotter. Some of the guys are talking about the racetrack getting a lot slicker. Have you made any changes?
Yeah, we've actually hopped ours up just a little bit. It's been way off, all day, just running real easy, and it hasn't been able to run the middle of the track. So we hopped her up a little bit, but not as much as we think it needs to make it the most amount of power, in hopes that the track will go away a little bit, and we'll be pretty close.
Well, you've heard from both drivers. Frank Hawley said they didn't change a thing. Mike Dunn says we hopped it up a bit. Remains to be seen which guessed right.
Well, Steve, you can hop these things up in a couple of ways, of course, by increasing the level or percentage of nitro, and also by fooling with the boost pressures on the supercharger.
And another way, too, is to tighten up the clutch. And that is the mistake some people feel the Hawaiian often makes, that they try to overpower the racetrack with the clutch. In other words, get a quick elapsed time because of the clutch and not so much horsepower.
The Hawaiian being moved into position by car owner Roland Leong, who started his racing on the island of Oahu a few years back. Mike Dunn carrying more fire protection like all these funny car drivers than any other kind of competitor, Steve.
Oh, and they need it. Here is the Chi-Town Hustler, the world champion, moving in the far lane. They take about 3 G-forces off that starting line. It was a beautiful lead, but instantly Frank Hawley puts a few car lengths on Mike Dunn. So Frank Hawley, there's that consistency. 595, almost like they dial it in. 241 miles an hour. Hawley goes into the final round of the Northstar Nationals.
And he knows his competition will be one of these 2 men, Mark Oswald or Kenny Bernstein, as one of the Candies and Hughes crewmen fires up that big supercharged Hemi engine in his car. Bernstein's fired up already, getting ready to move into line, Steve.
Brock, I think if you were to ask Kenny to summarize the season to this point, he'd tell you it was research and development. They have not won that many races, but they are making progress. Dale Armstrong and this crew are innovators. They're not trying to just get into the show. They're trying to win them all. He got a little taste of victory at an independent race last week in Salt Lake City, comes into this race confident. Kenny just drives the car. He lets Dale and the guys worry about making it go quick and go fast. Brock spoke to Kenny just before he climbed into the car.
Any thoughts before the semis, Kenny?
Well, we got to run better than we have the first 2 runs, I think. Candies and Hughes ran a little quicker than we did the last time. We need to get back in those 80s again that we had yesterday.
It's getting humid. You made any changes at all as far as fuel is concerned for the...
Not so much in the fuel area, a little touch there, but not much. Gave it a little bit more blower this time because the area is going away, like you mentioned, but it'll have a little horsepower. I hope it'll run.
Okay, good luck, Kenny.
Brock also got the pre-race thoughts of Oswald's car owner, Paul Candies.
I'm with Paul Candies on the line. Paul, you were very late coming up here. Were you just psyching people out, or did you have some problem?
No, we had a little problem. We went back there first round, and we got lost. We got behind ourselves. We had to change. The blower went bad, and we had to change it. And there's more things than we normally change, and we're just 10 minutes behind our normal schedule. So
that's the people excited.
And everybody's real excited. We knew we were going to be here.
You're going to be okay.
You bet. Everything will be fine.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Well, that's what he thought then. The smile has now disappeared from Paul Candies' face. There is trouble with that car. Tom Cattleman, one of the crewmen, Leonard Hughes, co-owner of the car, in there with some tools, trying to fix whatever the problem is. It may be a leak. Leonard Hughes disgustingly throws his wrench away. Cattleman is not going to give up, though. He is still in there trying to repair whatever the problem is. The engine is still running. You can see the blower belt and pulleys going around. Leonard throws in the towel. Leonard Hughes shuts the engine down. It is all over for Mark Oswald.
What a tough break, and had to be a very simple thing. Probably an oil line coupling of some kind that started a leak, Steve.
Kenny Bernstein backing up. He does not yet know that he has a gift here into the final round.
He sure doesn't, Steve, as Mark Oswald unlimbers himself from that race car. A very disappointed young man. You know, they get so much adrenaline build up for this 5-6 seconds of competition. It's incredible the letdown that they get when suddenly something breaks like that.
The crew goes through it as well, Brock. Janie Oswald in tears, so disappointed that they didn't even have a chance to go to the starting line and race. You know, that makes it doubly tough when you didn't get a shot at it even.
Yeah, well, everybody gets on an emotional high, and you get out there, and there's a crowd around, and that other car's running, and poor Mark Oswald takes his helmet off. He never even tasted battle in this particular semifinal here, as Kenny Bernstein will get himself what we call a single. I wonder whether he's going to run as hard as he can. One thinks he probably will, simply because he's going to look for lane choice. In this particular instance, if he runs quicker than Hawley did, he will get the lane choice. So you can be sure that Kenny Bernstein, regardless of the competition, is going to stomp on the throttle all the way down a quarter mile. And he's got himself a good, clean run. No problems. 597, 243 miles an hour. But the 595 of Frank Hawley is quicker. That gives Frank the lane choice. Kenny, not quite quick enough. Of course, for this young man, not even a chance to go quick enough. Mark Oswald, disappointingly looking at that component on the engine that put him out of that round, as Kenny Bernstein climbs out of the automobile, a happy man. He doesn't know yet how his lane choice is going to be for the finals, but he's ready to race as Steve Evans is about to talk with him.
Kenny Bernstein, single run or not, has definitely earned his right to be in the final round here at the Northstar Nationals with stunning performance. Kenny, a 597 will give lane choice, however, to Chi-Town.
Well, yeah, that's okay. I think both lanes are pretty equal. He ran 95 in the left, 97. There's not much difference, but I hate to win them like that, especially with a good friend like Paul Candies, but we got to take them that way. We'll take them.
You know, everybody would predict right now, knowing the Chi-Town in their history, they'll go out and run a 595 or 596.
Yeah, you can count on them being there. They've been there for, what, a year and a half now, almost 2 years. So we're going to step it up. We're going to have to again. I think it could use a little clutch on it, maybe would help, but we're just, you know, right there. It just needs to go a little quicker.
It's going to be a great final.
It sure is.
A great pair for the funny car finals. Kenny Bernstein versus the world champion Frank Hawley. We'll be back with top alcohol dragster action after this.
Here at the Northstar Nationals in Brainerd, Minnesota, we've established our finalists in the funny car class. Now it's time to do the same among the top alcohol dragsters, the semifinals. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and Ed Bruce visiting Art Malone down in Florida.
And Steve, remember this guy, Vic Anderson from Minneapolis. Remember the way that he got into this thing. First, no engine wouldn't start. Finally got it fired up seconds before the start, and then a red light from his competition.
I'd like to go to Las Vegas tonight with old Vic if he's willing. I think he's got the magic touch.
Well, we'll see. He's going up against a neighbor, really, Dennis Forcell, also from Minneapolis. And really, if we stand on records, he's the guy that brings the big reputation into this race.
He certainly does. He has far more experience in the alcohol ranks. But years ago, one of the most potent top fuel dragsters around was Vic Anderson. In fact, back in the days that Art Malone was talking about, the front-motored machines of the past. Now, Forcell is not backing up, Brock. Oh, okay. You've got to back that machine up under its own power. Well, you don't have to. If you've got a big enough, strong enough crew, I guess they could go out and push it back to the starting line, but that's getting harder to do these days. Old Buster Couch standing there, watching everything that goes on, doesn't miss a thing.
It's interesting. Nobody ever complains about the things that go on at the starting line, as we saw earlier with the high emotions that exist down there, as with the Mark Oswald situation. Nobody ever goes after old Buster. He's so fair and so competent at what he does that there just never is any kind of disputes or nobody's jumping out and taking swings at Buster. Of course, he's a pretty big guy, too.
Yes, he is. And that's true about the whole NHRA program. They run a very tight ship with a lot of consistency. You know the decision before you do. You don't have to ask anymore. But moving forward, and Vic Anderson kind of looked over like, where is he? My motor's getting hot. Finally, Dennis Forcell quickly comes up to the starting line. The team of Forcell and Clark, the blower belt spinning madly. The blower belt is spun almost 60% faster than the motor, Brock. They really put some RPMs into those superchargers.
Well, remember, that old blower came really off the old GMC supercharged diesel engines, and of course they're much modified and radically changed, but the basic design goes way back to before World War II.
It's that same technology, and the RPMs are up. Vic Anderson staring a hole in that yellow light. They get off right together. If anything, Anderson had a bit of an advantage, but something goes wrong with Anderson's car. It is Dennis Forcell at a 6.77 second elapsed time, and that won't please him. It's probably going to take quicker to win it, 205 miles an hour, but Forcell goes into the final round, and that's a pretty big payday in itself. Now, will he race this man, Don Woosley, in the yellow car from Kentucky, or will it be Darrell Gwynn in the other lane?
That will be the question, because at the present time, these two men are the major forces in top alcohol dragster. Woosley, Darrell Gwynn there, both getting ready to go. And in the meantime, let's go to Steve Evans with Dennis Forcell.
Dennis Forcell wrapping the chute, getting ready to head back to the pits to prepare for the final round. Dennis, it's been a long dry spell between final rounds and big competition for you.
Boy, it certainly has. It's going to be a good one.
Tell us about this race here just now.
Well, I think Vic definitely got out on me, and yes, something went wrong with his car at half track, so we were able to take the win. I think that without him having a problem, we wouldn't be here.
Okay, let's go back to the starting line and see who you're going to face in the final.
All right.
Very gracious observation by Dennis Forcell, because he probably was a loser until Anderson's engine went away. All right, the young Darrell Gwynn backs up. He is getting stronger and stronger. It'll be very interesting, though, to see how he runs against his arch rival, Don Woosley. They've raced against each other repeatedly over the last few seasons, Steve.
They certainly have, Brock. Darrell Gwynn learned to drive one of these cars quicker than any young man I think I've ever seen. If there's such a thing as a natural given talent, Darrell Gwynn's got it.
All across the sport of automobile racing, we're seeing second-generation drivers coming in the Indy car racing, stock car racing, and now in drag racing as the kid gets ready.
A violent dry burnout to the starting line. Back to that subject, Brock, I think it's because they were around the cars all their life, and they're not intimidated by them in the least.
No, they're not. And, of course, they've seen the technical side of this thing grow. They've learned how to wrench these cars and work on them. Don Woosley, much more the veteran, though.
But with the stronger car is Darrell Gwynn. Darrell Gwynn, #2 in the world in the far lane. Gwynn and Woosley. It is a red light for Darrell Gwynn. Darrell Gwynn has red lighted Don Woosley. The second car across the finish line will go into the final round. Woosley at 6.62 seconds. We heard Darrell earlier talking about red lighting, that it was the car's fault, picking the front wheels up. Well, apparently they had not repaired that chassis or modified it to stop that, because it did it again. Darrell Gwynn is out. So the final round in top alcohol dragster will see Dennis Forcell versus Don Woosley. Brock has been down there talking to Woosley and has found out there's some bad news.
No, we had ourselves a little bad news here after we got through with that little conversation a second ago. Looks like the motor's real hurt.
Yeah, I kicked the rod out.
You can't. There's no way to get it fixed.
I know.
So he's got a single run, huh?
Right.
Okay. We're sorry.
How painful it's going to be when the time comes for that man to watch a single for Dennis Forcell. We'll be back with the Pro Stock semifinals here at the Northstar Nationals. Stay with us.
We've got some Pro Stock semifinal action coming up here at the Northstar Nationals in Brainerd, Minnesota. But before we do that, let's go back to Florida and Ed Bruce and Art Malone.
Back at Sunshine Drag Strip in St. Petersburg, Florida with Art Malone. Art, when I was a kid growing up in Memphis, I wanted to play ball or pick a guitar. You grew up in the St. Pete, Tampa area. What did you want to do as a kid?
Well, as a kid, you know, I watched oval track racing, sprint car racing, that sort of thing, and that's what I wanted to be, was a sprint car driver. And maybe, you know, my dream was to end up at Indianapolis, which I eventually did. But never had no ambitions or even thoughts about drag racing, and it quickly became a part of my life. Of course, I ended up going to Indy, but even when I was driving in Indy, I still love Top Fuel.
So after you drove at Indy, you had drag strip experience. What did you feel about when you were thinking about driving oval tracks, Indianapolis? What did you think about drag racing?
Well, see, drag racing really helped me at Indianapolis, because I was used to the awesome speeds and the awesome acceleration, where most guys that go to Indy come from a short track somewhere and they're not used to those kind of speeds. So Indy never really impressed me, truthfully, even though I never admitted that to most of the guys. And I don't want to misrepresent Indy. I love Indy and the guys around it, just dearly love it. It's a close second to Top Fuel. But it never impressed me, I think, like a lot of people, because I came from drag racing, and the horsepower in Top Fuel is just awesome.
Still your life, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I love it right there.
You're going to be there forever?
I hope.
Art Malone, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We're going back to Brainerd, Minnesota.
The modern-day Pro Stock is making just about as much horsepower as the Top Fuel dragsters that Art Malone drove in those days. And it's time for the semifinals. The Oldsmobile of Warren Johnson in the near lane, the Chevrolet from New Jersey of Frank Iaconio in the left-hand lane. Iaconio heating up his tires. Warren Johnson now holding the electric line lock that locks the front brakes so that he can stationary spin those tires and heat them up, Brock Yates.
And he's got some impressive horsepower under that hood of that Oldsmobile, Steve. As you said earlier, Warren needs maybe 40 horsepower more than Frank Iaconio simply to stay competitive. As you can see, the automobile is much less aerodynamic. That's a Cutlass body versus that beautiful Camaro body over there on the right-hand side of your screen of Frank Iaconio, a much more streamlined vehicle.
Iaconio staged first, and that's rare. He usually likes to be last, but unpredictable is part of Pro Stock racing. A little bit of a mind game going on. Warren Johnson finally stages, and we have got a semifinal race. Iaconio and Johnson. Iaconio was off the starting line first off, and it's a good thing he was. Iaconio at 788. Warren Johnson ran quicker, a 783, but Iaconio's whole shot made the difference, and you see it right here.
It's also a good thing this whole thing is scored electronically, Steve, because it really would be almost impossible for the human eye to determine who the winner was. Back in the old days, we probably would have had a fist fight over who won this one.
But Warren Johnson, when he gets his time slip, is going to be sick because he ran 500s quicker but lost it on the starting line. I said before, he thinks maybe more about the mechanics of the car than driving. All right, here it is. Ford versus Chevrolet. The fans are up for this one. Bob Glidden in the Thunderbird in the far lane. Lee Shepard in the near lane. Between the two of them, the last 7 world championships.
And you got to look at the car on the right-hand side of your screen as the favorite. Lee Shepard's on a roll. As we said earlier, Bob Glidden has had a series of problems until he just came across the brand new engine from Ford. This may make the difference for him.
Bob Glidden was away first. Bob Glidden enjoying almost as big a hole shot as Frank Iaconio. And here comes Shepard.
And yet another photo finish in Pro Stock. This one won by Bob Glidden with a 789. He'll go into the finals against Frank Iaconio. But first, let's go to Steve Evans in the pits with funny car finalist Frank Hawley.
You know, anytime a guy has to race you, Frank Hawley, it presents an interesting problem because he thinks he knows what you're going to do. Run him 595 or 594, something like that, and he's got to go out and beat that time.
Well, the way it's been today, you know, you were saying we're real consistent. Well, almost everybody is. This guy we got a race in the final here, Kenny Bernstein and Dale Armstrong and the guys, they've got their own little computer going today. So, you know, we're going to try and do the same thing. And if they do, then it's going to be a driver's race on the starting line again.
They have freshened up the blower on that car, put a new supercharger on it, and that can wake up a motor sometimes.
Yeah, we do that occasionally, but that can also burn up a motor sometimes too. And you know, we've been accused of being a little savage sometimes, and I think Armstrong's been accused of being a little savage too. So we might see a couple cars down near the finish line side by side with smoke trailing out of them, because we're gonna go out there and race too.
Looking forward to it.
So are we.
All right, he's at full boost, and so is this man, Kenny Bernstein. They'll go against each other in the funny car finals here at the Northstar Nationals. Stay with us.
Thousands of dollars and a lot of prestige at stake as it's finals time at the Northstar Nationals. The winner in the top alcohol dragster class is a foregone conclusion. It's this man, Dennis Forcell, who has a bye run, a single run, because his competition, Don Woosley, hurt the motor too badly to make it to the starting line. Brock Yates?
Well, he's got all day to do it, but he's going to stand on it. He could theoretically just push that thing down there, Steve, but he's going to make a good, strong pass. A 675, 203 miles an hour. Dennis Forcell takes himself home a little money back to Minneapolis, and a pretty nice trophy as well.
Well, there was no pressure in that particular final, but wait till you see this one. Frank Iaconio and Bob Glidden. Ford versus Chevrolet, the Chevrolet of Iaconio from New Jersey, and both of these drivers earned their right to get into the final round via hole shots. In fact, they both had slower elapsed times in the semis. Amazing. Here is the sleek Ford Thunderbird of Bob Glidden. When the two have met over the past years, the edge on the starting line would have to go to Iaconio. The edge elapsed time-wise to Glidden. So this could be one of those famous photo finishes, Brock.
But maybe, Steve, we got a few seconds to wait because these guys have been known to play mind games with each other on the line.
Glidden's doing that right now. Finally, Glidden is in, and it is Glidden away first. A tremendous Pro Stock final is underway. Bob Glidden, Ford, Farley, Frank Iaconio Chevrolet. It is Glidden by a half a car. 787, 176 miles an hour. Iaconio runs even quicker, but he was late off the starting line.
A 785 for Frank Iaconio, but it's not good enough because of what you see over there in the left-hand side of your screen, that beautiful blue and white Thunderbird. Bob Glidden's out first, and he's the winner.
Well, Glidden staged last. He made Frankie wait, maybe got him a little rattled. Glidden, when he came in, was ready, poised, and when the light flashed, he was gone like a rocket. So Bob Glidden wins the Pro Stock Finals at the Northstar Nationals, and down at the far end, Brock Yates is with him.
Fantastic work. You know, he ET'd you by, you had a 787, he had a 785, but you had a 500s on him coming out. You really hole-shotted him, huh?
Well, it was close. I think maybe the rain kind of turned the lanes around. You know, the left lane was down just a little bit, and I believe the rain was to my favor.
Is that right?
Well,
so
the rain, it cooled the track off a little, and then when they come by with the dryer, we really hooked well. Well, that's the best run we've made all day.
Yeah, well, you were going, you were kind of all over the lot up until now, and I know I talked to you before. You were not happy, and I thought, boy, we're going to put some money on Bob Glidden. You better take a long shot. But it really worked out well, huh?
Oh, great. Well, we picked up a little bit each run.
Yeah.
I guess Frank picked up a little that run, but
yeah, Frank ran real strong.
It was our day to win, I guess, finally.
Well, congratulations. Third time this year. It's got to feel good.
Really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
So Bob gives a little credit to NHRA, who used their track dryer to put some heat in the racetrack while we were away just before that Pro Stock final. Terrific race, and we can expect the same thing, I think, here, Brock. Kenny Bernstein in the near lane up against Frank Hawley, the reigning world champion. These two guys, well, you talked to them, and they are up.
Yeah, well, I remember they used to talk about in the old days tipping the can. These guys tipped the can, tightened the clutch, pumped up the blower boost. They got everything going. They are really ready to race. Of course, Hawley, as you said before, Steve, he tends to remain very consistent. You wonder how much he and Austin Coyle have really done to that car.
And Kenny Bernstein's crew has been working towards that same kind of consistency, only hoping for 580s instead of 90s. The last time these two met was the season finale last year in San Francisco, and it was Bernstein off the mark first and beat Hawley, who ran a quicker elapsed time, and Hawley was just destroyed by that. Takes a lot of pride in his driving.
He sure does. In fact, he really, like Kenny Bernstein, concentrates almost exclusively on driving. He is a pro driver, so is Kenny Bernstein. Sometimes we see guys that'll behave both as drivers and mechanics, not these two.
Well, Frank Hawley was a mechanic on the car, but when he won the World Championship, that was a little bonus that Austin gave him. He doesn't have to lay on his back with hot oil running in his eyes anymore. He gets to fly into the races sometimes and stay kind of clean and really look like the professional that he is. Mike Guger, one of the crew people for Kenny Bernstein, helping Kenny stage that car. And right now, you can bet these guys are just holding their breath, concentrating, trying to get that mental advantage to leave before the other driver. They are pre-staged. No games here. They move right in. Bernstein inching forward. It's funny car final time. And they do leave right together. Both drivers tremendously alert. Bernstein and Hawley. It is Bernstein by a fender. At 592, his drought comes to an end.
Take a look at a classic funny car drag race. The reaction times of the drivers virtually equal. Both cars arrow straight down the drag strip. It's possible that Frank Hawley had a slight lead at half track, but it was the superior horsepower of Kenny Bernstein that brought him to a half-a-length victory here at Brainerd.
Coming out of his steaming, smoking funny car, Kenny Bernstein, who wins his first national event of this season. He won one last year as well. And a lot of hard work has gone into a tremendous effort this weekend. That consistency that usually only the Chi-Town has was matched by you, Kenny, today.
Well, I tell you, I got to take it. Armstrong and the Kruger, they did it this last round. We changed a lot of stuff, as you know, Steve, and Dale had her on there. It was good.
Now, he ran a 596, right where you figured he'd run,
right.
But you ran better than 92.
Well, we thought with the new blower, if it would work, if it just hang in there, it might help us, and it did. And, again, that's Armstrong, because he makes those decisions.
Well, congratulations again. A great side-by-side final, and I tell you, the place went crazy when this car won. The fans love you.
Well, super. Thank you. And listen, the Chi-Town and those guys, they got nothing to be ashamed about. They're there all the time. Great.
Kenny Bernstein, he did it here at the Northstar Nationals. just to get into a final round of one of these races is quite an accomplishment. Brock's with Frank.
Super run. You had him by 100th out of the hole, and everybody thought you were going to take him. You were a 96. He was a 92.
Yeah, well, there's not much you can say about it when you lose, but those guys, they did a fine job today. They deserve to win the race.
You did a super job, too. Congratulations. You're a fine winner and a super champion.
Well, we got another 800 points, so that's important, too.
That helps a lot.
Thanks
okay,
a lot.
good job, Frank.
Well, those points may help Frank Hawley to a second world championship, but today the spotlight is on Kenny Bernstein, a tremendous victory in the funny car category. I'm Steve Evans with Brock Yates for Ed Bruce. Have a good day.
The executive producer for American Sports Cavalcade is Harvey M. Pallage. Produced and directed by John B. Mullen. Promotional consideration provided for and a fee paid by the Style Auto World Championship Team, the nation's premier source of fast lane fashion. Style Auto, the champion's choice for the style of your life. The American Sports Cavalcade is a presentation of Diamond P Sports.